They say peace is just 10 meters away, but Moscow says the deal must be radically changed. This message comes from the outgoing U.S. envoy for Ukraine, Kellogg. Speaking in California, he said a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia is really close. According to him, only two major issues remain: the future of Donbas and the fate of Europe's largest nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia, which is now under Russian control. If we settle these two questions, the rest will work out, Kellogg said. But the Kremlin answered almost immediately, and the tone was very different. Russia says the United States must take radical changes to its peace proposals. What exactly must be changed, Moscow did not explain. Last week, dictator Putin held 4-hour talks in the Kremlin with the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. And after that meeting, the Kremlin admitted that territorial issues were discussed. And in Moscow's language, this usually means one thing: claims to the entire Donbas. Right now, Ukraine still controls thousands of square kilometers in the Donetsk region. And President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has already warned that handing over the rest of Donetsk would be illegal without a referendum and would give Russia a platform for future attacks deeper into Ukraine. Zelenskyy also confirmed that he had a long and serious phone call with Witkoff and Kushner just days ago. Kellogg also revealed a shocking number. He says Russia and Ukraine together have now suffered more than 2 million casualties, killed and wounded. Neither side officially publishes full figures, but the scale, he said, is horrific and unprecedented for a regional war. Today, Russia controls nearly 20% of Ukraine's territory, including Crimea, all of Luhansk, most of Donetsk, and large parts of Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. Last month, a leaked set of 28 U.S. draft peace proposals appeared, and it immediately alarmed officials in Kyiv and across Europe. They fear the draft limits Ukraine's path to NATO, keeps Russian control over occupied territories, and puts restrictions on Ukraine's army. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Ukraine is now waiting for direct reports from officials who spoke with the American team in Moscow.
Yesterday, we spoke with U.S. Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff and U.S. President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Thank you for your readiness to work together 24/7. The American envoys are aware of Ukraine's core positions, and the conversation was constructive, though not easy. We continue our work. Some issues can only be discussed in person. Umerov and Hnatov will brief me, and I will also speak with European leaders. We have meetings scheduled in London and Brussels.
Europe is facing a quiet but severe fight behind closed doors. The European Union is trying to unlock up to 210 billion euros in frozen Russian assets to help finance Ukraine's government and its defense for the coming years. But one country is blocking the road: Belgium. Most of those Russian assets are stored in Brussels, inside a huge financial clearinghouse called Euroclear. And now the Belgian Prime Minister is scared that his country could be left alone facing Russia's demands. The plan presented by the European Commission is early December is simple in theory. Banks that hold Russian assets would be forced to give the EU an interest-free loan for the same amount. The risk would be shared by the entire European Union, not by Belgium alone. At first, Ukraine could receive about 90 billion euros. Later, the amount could be much higher. Without this money, experts warn that Ukraine could start running out of funds as early as spring 2026. Brussels insists the scheme is safe. The idea is that one day Russia would have to give up these assets as war reparations in order to get sanctions lifted. But Belgium's Prime Minister, Bart de Wever, is not convinced. His biggest fear is political. If one day countries friendly to Russia, like Hungary, block the extension of sanctions, Moscow could demand its money back immediately. And then Belgium would be sitting on 185 billion euros that Russia wants returned. De Wever is also worried about retaliation, cyber attacks, financial pressure, even though some experts doubt Russia could actually put it off. Inside the EU, frustration is growing. Northern European countries that already give massive aid to Ukraine are tired of carrying most of the burden alone. They openly say the costs must be shared fairly. The Economist writes that this frozen assets plan has become a real stress test for European unity. In theory, the EU could move forward even without Belgium's approval, but that could cause a deep internal split inside the Union. All of this must be decided very soon. The proposal is expected to go to a summit on December 18. If the plan fails, some governments are already discussing a backup plan, joint EU debt to give Ukraine emergency funding. Support for Ukraine in the United States is not fading, it's growing. A new poll by the Reagan Institute shows that more Americans now want Ukraine to win the war and support sending U.S. weapons. Compared to last year, this support has clearly increased. At the same time, Americans are showing a stronger desire for global leadership. A growing majority says the United States should take a leading role in world affairs. Support for NATO is also at a record high. There is also strong belief that power matters. Most Americans say peace is more likely when the U.S. remains the world's strongest military power. This shift is important because just a year ago, American society was deeply divided over the war in Ukraine. And it comes at a sensitive diplomatic moment. Ukrainian and American officials are now holding intensive talks on what they call a realistic path to a just and lasting peace. More and more people in Poland now believe the country must prepare for war. For the first time in years, a clear majority of Poles support bringing back mandatory military service. According to a new nationwide poll, almost 60% say Poland should restore the draft because of the current international situation. Just a few weeks ago, support was below 40%. The shift is sharp and fast. Most people have already made up their minds. Only a small group says they are still unsure. Support is strongest among voters of Poland's conservative and right-wing parties. But even among supporters of the current ruling coalition, centrist, liberal and left-wing, about half now back mandatory service. The main reason is simple and very close to home. The Russian war in Ukraine has changed how Poles see their own safety. Military threats no longer feel distant or abstract. The future of warfare just took a major step forward in the United States. America has successfully tested an Abrams tank equipped with kamikaze drones. During military exercises in Texas, U.S. soldiers launched Switchblade attack drones directly from an Abrams tank and used them to break through enemy obstacles. General Dynamic and AeroVironment carried out the tests. Their new system is called Perch. It turns a tank into a mobile drone launch platform. From inside the tank, soldiers launched two types of drones, the smaller Switchblade 300 and the heavier Switchblade 600. The drones were used to scout targets beyond the line of sight and strike high-value targets behind enemy defenses, all while the tank itself stayed under cover. Military engineers say this changes how battles can be fought. The Perch system is now mounted directly onto the tank without cutting or rebuilding the vehicle. It uses the tank's power supply and control systems, and drone commands appear right on the standard Abrams screens. This means the crew can control drones without extra training and without leaving the vehicle. The lighter Switchblade is used against unarmed targets and can stay in the air for about 15 minutes. The heavier one is designed to destroy armored vehicles and fortifications. It can fly for around 40 minutes and hit targets up to 50 kilometers away. After a wave of attacks on so-called shadow tankers, the cost of insuring ships in the Black Sea has just jumped by up to 250%. That's according to new data reported by the Financial Times. Just 1 month ago, insurances cost around 0.25% of a ship's value. Now it is up to 0.75%, almost 3 times higher. Shipping brokers say the biggest price shock is in areas closest to Russia, near the coast of Ukraine, Georgia and Turkey. The reason is clear. Ukraine has stepped up strikes on Russian oil infrastructure and on tankers from the Kremlin's shadow fleet, a secret network of ships used to bypass Western sanctions. One insurance executive warned that Russia is likely to escalate the war, which could push prices even higher. The sharpest increase is hitting tankers linked to Russia. Ship owners are now afraid that even vessels involved in legal trade could become targets. There are also fear that Russia may retaliate by attacking Ukrainian grain and ammonia exports. What is the shadow fleet? Russia has built a massive underground network of more than 1,000 oil tankers to keep exporting oil to countries like China and India despite Western sanctions. Many of these ships change flags, switch off tracking systems, and often sail without proper insurance. Ukraine is preparing the next leap forward in its sea drone war against Russia. The commander of Ukraine's naval drone unit says more complex and more dangerous strikes against Russian forces are coming next year. In an interview with the Associated Press, the head of the elite sea drone group, known as Group 13, said Ukraine has already forced Russia's once dominant Black Sea Navy into retreat. Today, he says, Russian warships barely operate at sea. They usually sail no further than 40 kilometers from port, launch missiles, and rush back into hiding. They constantly hide, the commander said. Last month, Ukrainian sea drones were used in attacks on Russia's so-called Shadow Fleet. The commander refused to comment on those specific operations, but he did confirm this. The era of spectacular one-off strike may be temporarily over, not because Ukraine weakened, but because Russia adapted. And now Ukraine is preparing the next phase.
Today, we've likely reached a plateau. We are effectively limiting the enemy's movements, but those dramatic, high-profile strikes we saw earlier haven't happened for quite some time. That's because the enemy has adapted. We're working on many fronts to change the situation and create a turning point. For now, I can say this: we haven't lost effectiveness. We've simply reached a point where we're holding the enemy in check.
That's all for now. For more content, please subscribe.